Hey everybody, this is your boy John, aka Captain Lestat here. On today's episode of Geeks from the Multiverse, we're going to be talking about superpowers, but really the main question, what if your greatest struggle was actually your superpower? This episode dives into the idea that everyone has a unique power, even if it's not flashy, comic book worthy, or obvious at first. So stay tuned.
Evolve, adapt, overcome. Power up your mind and level up your soul. It just takes one small step to be
Damn, that was like a great fucking intro, man. Like that was that was baller, man.
I love that music, man.
That was like, oh my God, I'm jamming to this shit, especially because now.
I wish it was longer, but our intros can't really be that
No,
long.
I can't because it would be that shit.
I could really just be in the car, just like.
Well, especially like a rave, man. That's what I was feeling. I was like, damn.
Yeah.
And then the worst part is when that fucking song came on, I spilled my fucking drink all over me, and I was like, damn it.
You were really partying.
I was really partying that time. But anyway, so yes, no, this is our Evolve episode. So, yes, we always call it our serious episodes, or more like involved kind of episodes. And Matt came up with this idea, and I was like, I kind of like it. It's different. It's something that since we are talking about June, being Men's Mental Health Month in a sense, since we all found out that June in the society is different, when it comes to what was it, LGBTQIA plus month, and a few other things or whatever. Point is for us when we're talking about it is like, yes, it's Men's Mental Health Month, and again, so we're gonna say this too. Forgot. Happy Father's Day. We were gonna say it in the last episode. We forgot. We apologize, but yes. Happy motherfucking Father's Day. That's right, because both of us are dads. And you know what? Sometimes we don't get the credit we deserve sometimes. And that's just the way it is, okay?
Well, very hardly.
Well, that too, because most of the time it's more like, hey, why didn't you take out the trash? Why didn't you do the dishes? Why didn't you? You're like, well, why don't you take a... And you're like, wait a minute, never mind. I'm not going to say that on a podcast right now. I'm really not going to because I really don't want to get in trouble. So anyways, yes, when you're looking at superpowers, right? So, we think of superpowers as this like amazing, like out of the ordinary thing where imagine like for me, I always would love to have like teleportation, like just being able to like be somewhere in an instant without having to worry about it. Like, dude, like the amount of gas I would save in a car, or like a plane ride, or a boat, or whatever, that are like superhuman strength or speed, like, because then you always think of like Flash, like, hey, what do you know what Matt's wearing right now, actually, and it's like those kinds of things. It's like those would help, and you want to be able to, be good and not be a villain in doing that. But but we're being serious here, like, what superpowers really aren't, really about capes, not about costumes, not about radioactive spider bites like in Spider-Man and shit like that. It's just, it's something a lot deeper. It's something that is different, and sometimes it can be messy. It can be more human-like, it can be those emotions that, again, as especially men, we don't really, we don't talk about a lot of this shit because really it makes us look weak, or it makes us look like we're not up to standard of what society, portrays us. And so it's hard, when you're, I'll say it as a dad, it's like, I remember, actually I remember the other day, or it was a while back, actually, it was my brother and I were at a restaurant, and we were talking to this one guy, and, he's like, man, your dad must be your superhero. Like, just, being this, like, this role model. And my dad literally looks at this guy and says, no, actually, they're not, they don't have to be like, they don't, he basically was saying that he was like, I'm so proud of them that they're my superheroes, and they're my inspiration, and both my brother and I were sitting there, we're like, what are you talking about? Kind of like, it was just kind of weird, but like, I kind of understood that, it's true. Like, as a dad, and, especially like for a little boy and a son, it's, you want your son to succeed you, right? And you want him to grow, to be a better person, and to do all that. But it's hard, it's not as easy as I thought it ever would have been. I mean, there are things that, unfortunately, I'll I'll say this real quick, is there's things that I'm not proud of. I'm not, overly happy about, or I'm ashamed, or, I can name a whole list of things, but like there's things that I know that I could do better. And there's things that I have regretted and some things of that nature, but it's hard as a dad because you beat yourself up all the time because you're like, well, is it worth the time of me trying to do certain things with him? Is it, am I doing the right things for this individual? Am I, like, so you have this list of shit that you don't really know what's right versus wrong. And it's hard, so, looking back at the superpower, as humans or especially as guys, we're, we're made to be like this indestructible individual who can do anything and, fix anything and, make things happen when on a whim. It's
Right.
not, it's not
Yeah.
always like that, but I'll let you take it away. I know I went on a little rant there, but it's just the truth though.
Yeah, so I mean, we're kind of talking about like what even is a superpower, right? Like we're talking about like most of us when we hear, the word superpower, we're probably like our brain goes instantly to like flashy stuff, right? Like we're thinking flying, we're thinking, we just talked about the boys in the last episode, so obviously this episode is kind of our palate cleanser, right? We're cleaning our palates here from the boys.
We're basically
But-
talking the less bullshit, more serious stuff.
But we're talking like flying. We're shooting lasers out of our eyes. Not so much like Homelander. We're not doing that. But we're shooting lasers. We're turning into giant green rage monsters. That's what we think about when we think about superpowers. But honestly, like let's be real. Most of us can't even find matching socks in the morning. So
Well,
I
that's
mean,
that's
if,
an everyday problem though.
if that's the bar, we're screwed. Honestly, like we're screwed.
That's my everyday problem, Matt. That's the problem. Is half the time I can't find
mean,
where the
so-
fuck half that shit is.
When we look at a comic book definition of a superpower, this is like a traditional definition, I would say. It's a unique, often unnatural ability that makes someone stand out above the norm, usually gained by accident, science experiment gone wrong, alien blood, a childhood trauma that would leave the rest of us in therapy for life, right? Like that's in comic book world, some examples would be mutant genes, like you have X-Men or mutants in general. Super soldier serum. I mean, there's a few examples, but some of them are, some of the major ones, Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes, like they're the ones that have gotten them. I mean, there's a few more.
Oh yeah,
but gamma radiation. I mean, the big one is Hulk. Like,
right.
if you're talking, radioactive spider bites, like
It's clearly talking about Spider-Man because there's not many others that get radioactively bit. But
right.
yeah,
But if you haven't been bitten by something radioactive, you don't have mutant genes, and you haven't been given some kind of a super serum, you probably just pay bills like the rest of us do. Like,
well-
right?
well,
You
so-
probably just are looking for your socks like John is.
yeah. Well, so the other thing is, I'm thinking about it is like, what's in which I think it was the first Deadpool movie. Who was the guy? It was that random dude that he was like randomly in the team, and like he's just a regular guy that they bring in.
Peter.
Peter.
Yeah.
We're basically Peter. Okay, we're basically just chilling, and we're not doing a damn
I
thing.
mean, most of us aren't as cool as Peter.
Oh,
is,
that's
but,
true. I mean, Peter. What didn't they say something about Peter Pool or something like that? Like in one
Yeah.
of the later ones, but yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you. Like, it's hard to, establish yourself as, someone that of like these characteristics as we're talking about superpowers and whatnot. It makes it harder for us because we will, again, like I said before, we're wanting to be the best every day, striving to be better than what we were, especially in our, like, for example, like my parents and like, let's say your parents and so forth, like you want to be better than what they've done. Now I know in Matt's case, yes, I can fully agree with him that he's done a lot better than what his parents have done. I'm just going to say that. I'm not going to say anything else about it, but like, yes, he's done a lot better than what his parents have done. But like, for me, like the same thing, like I want to strive to be better than my parents. And I would hope that my kids, and I say kids, I know I only have one kid, but at some point, a couple more down the road, like I want them to be better than me, like I want them to know that like, hey, I pushed you to strive for better, and so looking at that power, right? If you start to really kind of break it down, it's really the biggest thing is it's you. You're your own unique power. You like not everyone's all the same. We're not just fucking copy and paste, and that's just what it is. So when Matt and I we talk about like mental health and therapy and stuff like that, people say, "Oh, well, that's very similar stories," and like, is it? Because really, it's based on that individual's past. You might hear similarities of certain things, but it's their life. It's told by them. Like it's told by their perspective and this and that. So it makes them unique on their own. So like, when you're hearing this or when someone's talking to you about it, like, I can say, yeah, my life is totally different from what Matt has ever experienced and vice versa and so forth. Like it's not, we have very common interests, but like him and I have very different lives and basically how we grew up and all this other shit. Like, I'm not going deep into it, but like Matt had a rough upbringing. Like that was just the way it was, where I may not have had that, and that's okay. But I learned different things that maybe he didn't learn and so forth. So, as a friendship, we build upon that, but again, not the point here.
Right.
It's just, you're really looking at it as, a power, right? So like, if you, again, want to break this down even further, it's earned. It's not given, it's something that you're born with. Sometimes you learn it while you get older. So there's different ways of doing it, but at the same time, it's it's always ever changing.
Superpowers are, and when you look at some, most of them in the comic books, like they're given, they're not necessarily earned. Spider-Man was bitten by a spider.
Right.
Hulk was.
Well, he kind of did it to himself.
Banner was, induced with radiation.
Well, I mean, what his goal was he was trying to recreate the super soldier serum, and then the problem was he stepped into the I guess the pod or whatever, and he got stuck.
The thing was, it wasn't earned. He did it to himself. Steve Rogers, even still, you can say like, well, he earned it, but he really didn't. He was given a serum that made him Captain America.
Right, and the thing is like he had a belief.
It's not like he worked out his whole life became strong.
No, I mean, like for him, it's like, somebody saw him as a genuine version of what they wanted them to represent at that time. And so, yes, you're right. He, in some ways, was given it, but, as time went on, in some ways you can say he did earn it because, like, they earned that position.
You can say, like, where his heart was, based on, failure and trauma and the stuff that he dealt with before, sure. You can say that, but like where his we're talking superpowers came, that was not earned, it was given to him.
Right. And then, so like,
and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about how he earned them later on, or
right? No,
how he's worked through them. We're just talking about the superpowers and how people have gotten them.
But even like in this next portion of it is like, it's built, right? Through like the hardships and the bullshit is, in between of everything. And so it's not the heroics, that defines us. And so, in every hero story, whether you look at, Spider-Man or, Captain America or, whatever, I mean, name the person, you can probably figure it out. Like they always have somebody. Usually I'll say it like I always think of like Spider-Man and Batman for a second. So like, Batman lost both of his parents at a very young age. It was due to a robbery, gone bad. Both of his parents got shot, this and that. Spider-Man, again, Uncle Peter. Uncle Ben. Sorry, Uncle Peter. I don't know why I said that. I'm sorry.
Hey,
Peter. Anyways, my bad. Uncle Ben, my bad. I don't know why I said that. Uncle Ben, he died, right? Because, again, he was shot, and then, Peter saw this, and so it was like, okay, well, how do I get through it? And so, like, it's like you're seeing the emotional side of both, heroes in the sense, and then they decide, okay, what do I want to do with this? Do I want to sit back and let things happen, or do I want to do something about it? And so they both did. I mean, in their own different ways. One actually had powers, the other one didn't. He just was rich and had the ability to make technology and so forth. I mean, so depending on what you're looking at, a lot of life, I mean, we go through the ups and downs all the time. We go through the highs and the lows and everything else in between. And, I can say right now, I'll even say it about myself. Like I'm going through, for a long time, I was going through a low, It was hard for my family and I. Allie was working, constantly, working a 40-hour week job, and she was looking at trying to get another job. And I said, don't do that. I said, I want to find another job, and it was hard. It was hard to maintain that. And so, we're doing this for a couple years now. And finally, I was like, okay, well, I got to find a job. And I found one, thank God, starting Monday, just throwing it out there. And now I'm excited. I'm ready to get out back to the world. And now I'm trying to get back to, a way of life that we were used to living a few years ago. And, it's getting us back to that point. And so, like, hopefully with that being said, there's things that I can do possibly, for example, like for the podcast, so I know Matt has had a hard time with certain things, and, he still finds ways to make things happen. And so, like, I want to be able to help with, certain things at some point, because I don't want him to think that I don't care. Right. And I know Matt doesn't think that, but I just, there's just some things that like that, like I want him to understand, like, it's not always about him. It's about us. We're doing this together. It's not about just him and I doing it separately. But, I don't know if you want to chime in on this piece a bit, because I figured you might.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we're talking about, yeah, we're talking about superpowers, but I think you kind of have to take this and, like, take the characters and, like, kind of put the superpowers aside, and you have to kind of, like, almost look beyond them. Like, sure, you can look at Captain America, you can even look at someone like, Superman, but you can also look at a character like Batman, who doesn't have any, right? Like, you can look at these characters and, like, sure, yes, they have powers and they can do things, but sometimes, like, it's not about what they can do, but you have to look at, like, the hardships that they've dealt with, and the trauma and the failures and the chaos that Batman just has to face. I mean, there's a whole book on the philosophy of Batman, and I've actually, I've got it from the library, a couple times. I haven't read through the whole book, but, like, this book is, if you ever wanted to read a philosophy book, more power to you. But it gets deep, and it goes into, like, the whole philosophy of, like, Batman's, thinking behind not killing people, and the philosophy behind, like, how he thinks about his loss of his parents, and how that builds into why he does why he is Batman, why he just doesn't. We look at Batman and go, why doesn't he just kill the fucking Joker?
Oh yeah, for so long, yeah.
Like, why doesn't he just kill this dude and just move on? Like, why doesn't he just kill these guys and not just lock them up, and then they just keep escaping, and then he just keeps going after them and just keeps locking them up, and they just keep escaping, and it's just like,
it's the power struggle.
This literally could be over in 4 comic book episodes.
Shot him in the head and call it a day.
Right. But this is the thing, like, the trauma and the hardship that he faced for the loss of his parents, and then you have these characters like the Joker, who's constantly pushing this trauma and the failures, and then the straight up just chaos. And then you have this character who's like, I was there when my parents died. I don't kill because of this. And he holds true to that, despite this crazy, chaotic clown figure who's just chaotically just killing and doing whatever the hell he wants to do around Gotham, and blowing shit up, killing anybody he wants, doing whatever he wants. And you just have Batman going, okay, we're just going to lock you up again. We'll see you in 6 months.
Well, no, you're right.
You know what I mean? It's like, you just bullet right in the head and be like, hey, just go to early Batman, where he held guns and shot people.
You're right. If you look back at the early days of Batman, yes, he technically had a gun. And they realized that was not what they wanted to portray at the time. And they thought to themselves, like, hey, can we make something different? And so, of course, they used, like, the batarangs and the different pieces of equipment, so they just portrayed him a different way. But the one thing that, especially like Batman, that I'm always impressed with is, like, He's the only member of the Justice League that is so damn smart that really, and I mean, Matt knows what I'm probably about to lead into, but like, he literally finds a way. So, like, if one of the members of the league is ever corrupted or ever goes evil or anything, like, he builds a fucking plan to find a way to neutralize them. I mean,
Right.
he literally studies them. He's a strategist. Like, he literally looks at you and he's already about 50 heads or 50 heads, 50 moves ahead of you. Like, he's already there. He's already got a plan. He's got about basically all the way to
Except
Z.
he never did one for himself.
No, he actually did. He did. He did one, and it was mostly because now I understand it depends on what game you played, but like I know one game was I think it was either Gotham Knights or it was actually that new Suicide Squad game. Because
I never played
Yeah, I
that.
know it's not a great game, but you're not missing much. Basically, what it is like he basically states he's like talking to, you know, Tim Drake, you know, Jason Todd, like the Nightwing and everyone else, and he's basically saying the only way to defeat Batman is with all the training that I've trained you on. You know, and kind of saying like, you know, if you remember, if you rely on your training and if you work together, you can take me down. You know, and in some ways it was powerful. But anyways, I know we're kind of going off the loop here, but like the point is though, is, you know, looking at powers, looking at the traumatic piece to this, it's, you know, as an individual or as a person, you know, it basically defines you, right? So like you can't ever say that, you know, when you go through life and you go through a traumatic experience, you know, it basically helps you define who you are, right? So like, you know, the loss of a family member or, you know, maybe a traumatic event of like, you know, let's say going to war or, you know, losing your legs or, you know, I could go on and on, but like if you go and you know, you look at events like that and it basically is like a moment of life where it's hard to talk about. It's not something that you just want to bring up all the time. You know, it makes it very uncomfortable for you. Like those are the kinds of moments that
Yeah.
define you. And then this is where I'm saying that it's not always easy to do, but like if you're just going to sit there and, you know, hide, you know, in a corner and not talk about it or do this and that, then how are you going to grow? Or how are you going to find out what, you know, what we're talking about here? Like, how are you going to find your power? Like, how are you going to find something that is going to be your meaning and purpose in life? You know, depending on what that is.
Yeah. So I mean, what is the criteria of a real superpower? So I mean, for one, it's unique to you. You know, if you're really comparing yourself to others, you really just can't be doing that. Like you can't be looking at other people and comparing because everyone's got a different skill set. We all got different, you know, backstories. We all got different origin stories.
Right.
Like you can't be Batman. You can't be Superman. You can't be, you know, yes, I get it. Like other comic books and other, you know, other franchises have copied and I get it. But you can't be a knockoff Batman.
True.
You just can't be. You have to be like unique to you. You can't copy someone else's trauma and then expect the same power. It's not how it's not
Right,
not
that's
how
not
it
how
works.
that works. Right.
Like it's not a TikTok trend. It's not this isn't like a personal it's a personal transformation arc. Like you can't just be like, hey, this works on TikTok. I'm just gonna copy it too.
No, I
You
mean
know, like-
it's a defining moment. That's what I would say. I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, when you're looking at, you know, a person, you know, but like I said before, like we were just talking about, like it's unique to you. It's not something that you can just, like we've just said, like copy and paste. We can't, you know, do all that, like, because at the end of the day, if everyone was like you or like the other person next to you or whatever, dude, the fucking world would be a boring fucking place, and you would not want to be hanging out. Like if I saw a bunch of Matts walking around, oh my god, I could only deal with one Matt. Do you think I could deal with like 50 of them? Hell no.
I would think you would freak the fuck out.
I probably would freak the fuck out. I'd be like, what the fuck is the
Oh my gosh.
I'd be like, what is going on here? It's like, wait, did you take
You
this?
would just see a bunch of me just going,
Or no, this would be Matt. He'd be like, rockin', and rollin'. And all I hear, I'm like, shut the fuck, or that stupid lion with the fucking laugh. And then I'd be like, hey, what'd you take? He's like, I took Combo V. was like, you son of a
I
bitch.
took some compound B.
He's like, you son of a bitch. No, I mean, kind of moving forward here, but like,
So yeah, this would be the second thing.
well, second thing, but yeah, it's so it helps you or others survive, adapt, and thrive. So so let's say your so-called power was only works in like fantasy football. Does it really count?
No, that doesn't.
No, it doesn't really count at all, right? And so,
no, if my superpower was like, hey, I'm really good at fantasy football, well, good for fucking you. But that doesn't help anybody unless you're playing fantasy football with a bunch of dudes. Like, sure, you can help your dudes in fantasy football, but like, it doesn't count to help. Maybe fantasy football helps you personally, but it doesn't help others to like survive, adapt, or thrive in any way. But like, what does help? Staying calm in chaos. Maybe like reading people, or rebuilding after you fail, or turning your pain into a purpose.
so I would even say the last one is probably one of the most impactful ones because when you start to look at a lot of organizations or like nonprofits, things like that, there's usually, unfortunately, like a horrific event or something that has happened where they want to strive to do something. Like, so, when Matt and I have talked about like bullying, bullying has been going on for from the age of time, basically when dinosaurs were walking and of course the cavemen were there and all this other shit. Like, bullying's been around.
Yeah.
It's been there. It's been whatever. But like,
I'm saying right now, some of these quotes are real fire right here. Like, if you're not catching some of these quotes, like they're absolutely. I'm reading a little bit ahead. Like, even like you can't copy someone else's trauma and expect the same power. Like, I'm like reading that, but I'm reading one like that's a little bit ahead, and I'm like, whoa. And I don't know if I wrote it or if I got it from somewhere else, but like, if you're not catching some of these quotes and like writing it down or making a note of it, you're making a huge mistake because like these are fire. Like these are some good, at least some good advice.
I was gonna say life lessons. Life lessons, maybe that you haven't even thought about doing yet, or maybe you haven't experienced yet, or whatever. But again, having that in mind, and maybe if anything, like teaching someone else this, because if you see this behavior, maybe you teach them this.
Like this next one, like this is the third thing, and it often this is the criteria of a real superpower, right? This is what we're talking about. So the first one, it's unique to you. The second one, it helps you or others survive, adapt, and thrive. So this is the third thing. Before we move on to origin stories, the real life edition, this is the very third thing, the criteria of a real life superpower. It often comes from the messiest parts of your life. This is one of these quotes that I was reading and I was like, holy moly. If you don't write this down or take a note of this, you're crazy. But you don't get a healing factor unless you've been hurt. Ouch.
Right, and then and then even the next part, you don't build resilience unless you've had to keep going. So like when you think of the word resilience,
Seriously.
right? So like the ability to bounce back and the ability to move forward and to cope with whatever trauma that might be and so on and so forth. I mean, people have their own definitions of it, but it's the ability to bounce back from a very traumatic experience or situation or whatever you want to call it, and being able to take it and do something with it. Because I think a lot of times when, depending on what those situations are, you're usually pretty quiet. You're not really trying to talk about it, and you might be very humbled, or not. Maybe let me rephrase that. Maybe humbled, but you were there, but you're not really wanting to think more of it or really talk more about it because of the fact that, again, depending on that situation, it could be very hard to bring it back up again because now you're reliving it. And this is where, I'll say it like, PTSD, or now it's PTSI, as they now want to call it. And those are the things that it triggers, and yes, I know the word trigger can affect certain individuals. Yes, I'm just going to say it now, but like it makes it harder for them to want to express their feelings or express what they're talking about because of these things. And so, with that being said, when you start to look at, the third thing we're talking about here, you have to go through the pain. You have to talk about it. You have to do these things because in order to heal, in order
Yeah.
to do these things, to grow and to have that purpose or to, rebuild in a sense, you have to do it because if you want to live in the past,
I mean,
good
this
luck.
is what makes this quote like you don't get a healing factor unless you've been hurt. This is what makes it powerful because if you think about like Wolverine and Deadpool, like they don't heal and their healing factor doesn't come into play until what? Until they actually get hurt.
Right. And I mean, you look at Wolverine, who literally almost like, I think in the comic books was literally like a pool of blood. Like Wolverine was so badly injured to the point where like he was like literally a pool of blood. And then all of a sudden, like you see him start to regenerate his whole entire body from the ground, and so.
Deadpool in the movie lost his lower half and he
Well,
starts
no,
growing
right.
new
Yes.
friggin' a lower half, like a
No,
whole lower
right.
half of his body.
But I'm just throwing it as an example, like to
Yeah.
be a pool of blood and then to be like, okay, I'm coming back now. I mean, how low can you really go? Because
Right.
that's as low as you're probably going to get.
That's what we're saying. Like, you don't get that unless you've been hurt, and you can't build resilience, unless you have had a point where there's been resistance.
Right. And
If you don't have that resistance, then you don't need the resilience to keep going.
right, because then again, what's your purpose? What is your motivation? What is those things that are keeping you going at this
If
point?
you've never been hurt, then you don't need a healing factor.
Right. Because I guess you just keep on moving, keep on trucking.
So that's really where that power of that quote really comes like forward. And if you really do think about it, it's like it's really, really powerful.
Well, I'm not gonna lie, man. Even the next one, like having an origin story, or having a way of like, okay, where did I start? How did this become to be and where am I? Like where is this leading me into? Like, where's like the pivotal moments that are important to me in my life in the sense. So like, I'm just gonna jump real quick for a second. So like a real world example, right? So when you look at, for example, like in basketball, like Michael Jordan, okay, we consider him one of the greatest players of all time when it comes to basketball, and he was literally cut. And yeah, I'm not even looking at the fact because I already knew that he was literally cut from his high school basketball team. Didn't play high school basketball. He went on to play at University of North Carolina. I'm pretty sure he won the championship. And then, of course, he was a top. I can't remember what pick he was in the draft, but he was up there. But people were like, "Man, I don't think this kid's gonna, make it. He's not gonna be one of the best of all time, and this and that." And like, he won 6 rings. Okay, never lost the final, never done all this. I know that Matt's not really a big sports guy, but I mean, if you compare that, if you start to look at even like Tom Brady, yes, he's won 7 rings and he lost, I think it was like 3 or 4 Super Bowls. At the same time, he's gone 11 fucking times to a national event and he's won more than than his losses. So, when you're looking at somebody who's like, you think is basically this like underdog, right? Someone that, he's not going to fucking make it. He's not going to be the best. He's not going to be that. These are the things that make it really important. So like, I'll let you kind of talk about it here in a second, but like the childhood adversity, like toxic relationships or even like failures or rejections, these are like pivotal moments, especially in childhood. I feel like that's where a lot of these people get a lot of their strength from because they think to themselves as a kid, they're like, if I have to put up with this shit when I get older, I don't want to fucking do that. That's just me. If I was thinking,
Did you already mention Terry Crews?
No, I haven't mentioned. I thought we were going to talk about that stuff first. Then we trying to jump in. I only mentioned a real world example real quick, but go ahead.
All right. Well, I mean, since I already mentioned Terry Crews, but yeah, I mean, a little bit about Terry Crews. He was, he actually grew up, in Flint, Michigan.
Oh, see, I didn't know he was born in Flint, Michigan. Okay.
His father was an alcoholic. He was very abusive to his mother. But he was in the NFL.
Yes, he was.
He actually played for the Rams, the Chargers, and the Redskins, if you didn't know.
I don't think I knew the last one, I think.
So yeah, it says he played for the Rams in 91. He played for the Packers in 93, the Chargers and the Redskins in 95, and then the Eagles in 96. And then he retired from the NFL in 97. He moved to Los Angeles and pursued an acting career, which was kind of one of his long-standing, pursuits that he wanted to do. But he was a former NFL player. He wanted to do sports. That was his thing. Like, he wanted to do sports. You can tell by his physique that
He's been doing it for a long time.
he wanted to do sports, but he pivoted into art and acting and then advocacy. Like, that was kind of where he pivoted to, and he used his strengths. Like, he had an origin story. He used his hardships, his challenges, his experiences in life, and then used them to kind of pivot. Like, he could have stayed probably in the NFL, but he was like, no, I want to do something different. And it's the same with Michael Jordan. Like, yeah, I mean, being cut from your high school basketball team, like, he could have just turned the other way and been like,
I'm done.
yeah, I suppose I suck at basketball. I'll probably just go play baseball or something. Like, I don't know, like,
So it kind of, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not.
do something different, you know?
So,
I don't know.
No, you know what's funny? Now I'm thinking, I know it's going to sound a little weird here, but like, I loved playing basketball and baseball growing up. I played a little bit of football growing up, but, as I got older, it was like, man, it wasn't as important. So I really liked playing basketball and baseball. And so, I remember playing it all the way through. And, I remember my parents saying, hey, you have a decision to make between, sports and music. And I was like, I do love music, but I was like, I don't know. I really don't know if I want to pursue this. I want to go for sports. So I got into my, freshman year of high school. So of course, Matt knows a little bit about it, but like in my high school 4 years, I went to 3 different high schools. I spent two high schools already my freshman year, and then the last one was, of course, when I graduated from Manchester Memorial. But like the first year, I was literally it was Lexington High in Mass for like a quarter semester, and then I go switch over to Nashua South, and I did that. Right, so like the thing is like my Lexington experience. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, and then I just turn around and I go somewhere else. So I go to South. And I'm like, I really want to play basketball. So I played freshman year basketball and I was great. And I was like, I was like one of the starters at one point for a freshman team. And I was hoping to get the JV, but we moved to Manchester. And so it would suck because I tried baseball and they said, oh, sorry, you're not good enough. Like, whatever. And I'm sitting there like, I'm not fucking good at, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I'm not good enough. I was like, I was kind of pissed. And so, I look at it back and then, I played basketball for 3 more years. And then, somebody in my senior year was like, hey, you should play. And I was like, why? I was like, we have a guy that's 6'10" and I'm 6, probably 5. I'm not going to be a center. Realistically, in the NBA, I would be a fucking point guard or a shooting guard or whatever the fuck it was. So I'm like, I'm not going to be a center. Like, that's all I know is I only know about being a center because I was always a tall dude. I'm not going to be a backup to a guy like that. The only thing I was really good at, though, was like defense. And so, long story short, is like, college, I was like, I just kind of gave up. And so, to answer like why I was saying all this is like, I gave up. I did. And I wish I didn't in some ways because I wish I would have had that drive, that motivation, or somebody to be like, stop being a lazy piece of shit and get the fuck up and start doing it. Like, and that was the thing with me is like, I wish I had that person to be like, stop being I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it right here, right now. Stop being a fucking pussy and get the fuck up and start doing your fucking thing. Like, if you want it that bad, you go fucking do it. I wish I had that. And so like, there's times where it, kind of like you're looking at this and, I mean, granted, you find other avenues, but
yeah, I mean, that's that very last one. It's like the failures or rejections, like developing that grit and the self-belief and that reinvention. Like, that's the real world examples. Like Michael Jordan and Terry Crews, like they had that grit, that self belief, and that reinvention to, Michael Jordan become that relentless work ethic machine
Right.
that he became in the NBA, and Terry Crews to, you know, again reinvent himself and to go into art and acting and advocacy and doing everything that he does now.
Well,
Again, you also have people from hard neighborhoods who, they develop street smarts and somehow develop like survival instincts, and they use them as actual skills. Like you
right.
think like, oh, that guy's just a gang member. Is he still alive?
Right. He's clearly
Well,
doing
yeah.
something right.
Well, he's doing something right because there are a lot of freaking gang members that are dead.
Right. And, kind of looking back at it, it's like, when you start to look at like this kind of stuff, we were just talking about, you need to have a realization that at some point in life, right? Like, if your dream was like, hey, I want to be that next Michael Jordan, or hey, I want to do this. There is a realization of like sometimes that, like, yes, I would love to be that, but I also have to be realistic, right? Because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, Matt. I remember going into high school, and I had no fucking idea what I wanted to do, and then all of a sudden, like my junior, senior year, somebody was like, "Man, what about architecture?" And I learned the truth about like what these people have to do, like in college. Like, there's like usually about 400 people that start, and by the time they graduate, there's like less than 50 people that are done with this degree, and I'm sitting there like, I can't spend fucking $200,000 to then assume that I'm gonna fucking be those 50 people. Now, granted, I probably could have if I really worked my ass off and did all that, but then I was thinking to myself like,
Hey, look at us now. We'll be the next Joe Rogan podcast.
hey, what do you know? Maybe we'll be the next Joker. You're right. Maybe we'll be up there in those ratings. But like,
But the thing is, like, radioactive spiders aren't real. But the thing is, like, crippling student debt, that's real. That's real shit right there.
And so like I was like, fuck that. I'm like, there's no fucking way. So I had to be realistic. So somebody was like telling me like, hey, what is something you like to do? And I said, well, I was like helping people, and they're like, oh, what about social work? And I'm like, okay. I was like, kind of naive, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? Like, well, you're teaching people, you're mentoring people, you're kind of guiding them and things. Oh, okay. And I don't have to explain the whole story, but like, I learned a different avenue, and I was like, my parents, my mom especially was like, hey, you should really be a teacher. And I said, fuck no, I don't want to be a teacher. I'm like, I don't want to deal with bratty kids all the time. No offense. I'm like, they don't want to deal with me. I don't want to deal with them, especially when I just got out of high school. I was like, fuck that. I'm not going back to that place.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. So again, like when you start to think about those things, like this is where, your childhood, it really takes an impact. Those relationships, especially the toxic ones, those failures, that is important, so it doesn't
Right.
matter what part of your life. I mean, let's say you had a boring ass childhood, and then really it was when your like high school years or whatever, like kind of hits the, basically full force, then that's okay. It doesn't have to happen overnight because you don't want it to happen overnight. You'd rather it spread it
No.
out, if anything. But yes,
But the thing is, like, the third topic of this whole, what if your greatest superpower was your, what if your greatest struggle was your actual superpower? Your greatest insecurity would be your power. So, like, let's go over a few. These are just examples. They might not be yours, but these are just a few examples. So, I overthink everything. Your power might be precognition.
I isolate under pressure. Your power might be invisibility.
That would be fucking awesome.
It would be.
I would love to be invisible.
You know what? Fuck it. Susan Storm, man. Let's go.
And I'm not even saying that from a point of being like inappropriate. I'm just saying like I would love to just be like, you know what? I fucking hate people today. Invisible.
Not even. Well, then you have to be butt ass naked. So good luck.
Hey, if I'm invisible, then fuck, I'd be butt ass naked all day.
I'd be like, and we start to see you, and I'm like,
If I just didn't have to be visible, then fine. As long as people don't see me, I'm cool with that.
he's like, I don't give a fuck. You just point me in the right direction.
The last one is I cry at dog commercials. You might be, your power might be emotional empath level 9,000.
Well, I mean, it's crazy. Like, like I said, looking at superpowers for a second. I like I told you before, like the superhuman strength in looking at the teleportation and stuff. I mean, looking at it as like an insecurity. I mean, sure, you're right. I mean, that could be the one weakness that you have. It's like that kryptonite in a sense. Like if I'm too powerful, I can't touch anybody, right? So like in the sense of like Superman, if I have like superhuman strength, well, I can't touch you because if I crush you, then you're dead. Or like if I teleport you, like let's say I have the teleportation. What if I don't teleport you right away and I teleport you to the fucking sea and Jaws comes out of fucking nowhere and bites your head off? Like right? Because you don't know because maybe you don't have that ability to control it yet. But there's so many things like that where.
Well, and we actually just talked about The Boys, and this is what I like about the show is because how real it is, and it doesn't pull punches, and it doesn't filter everything through like the appropriate censor and filter, right? Like Marvel, like you get people with powers that like are useful for the narrative that Marvel and DC will filter the movies with. The Boys will just throw people with powers that like, why are they in this show? Like, right? Like you're like, why are they in the show? Why does that need to grow and attack people? But like occasionally, like you'll have somebody in the show. Like there was a character, in the show that his name was Mesmer. You probably know if you remember the show.
Yeah.
He was, I guess you can call him an empath. But he did a movie when he was a young kid because he was a soup, and he could read people by touch.
I think I'm starting to remember him. Yeah.
And he initially was working for Vought, and what he ended up doing was he walked by a Wall Street person, like somebody that worked in Wall Street, and got some insider trading because he could read his mind and did some insider trading, and then the SEC basically like got wind of it and then Vought like, nope, you're not going to be part of us anymore.
Right.
So they basically terminated him. So yeah, he basically was just signing, but long story short, like that's basically like what he was able to do. Like anytime like he would brush up against anybody or shake somebody's hand, he could basically get your entire life flashing before his very eyes. And that was like the very same thing. Like you cry at dog commercials, you could be an emotional empath. But like if we kind of like reverse engineered that question and said, if a comic book hero had your exact life, what would their power be? And for me, like, I don't know, like for me, I'm very introverted.
Oh, yes, you are.
So for me, I would almost say, one, I don't know, but I mean, I would almost say more tech based. I would say probably more like
the ability to like control tech around you, things like that. I would say that's what I would think in that sense.
I probably would say something similar to that, like technology, or at least being like. There would have to be like a creativeness to it, though. You know what I mean? Like being creative with technology or something like that. But it would definitely not be something like you would be doing in public.
Right. I mean, if I was to, let's say, throw it back onto me, I'd be like, you know what? If it was based on me, because I would say if we're basing it off like the intro extroverted stuff, I mean, I'm more extroverted than I am introverted. I'd say maybe the art of persuasion, kind of like Lucifer's power. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about? Like when he's talking to him, and then he's like, "Yeah, go ahead and do that," and he like they just do it for him, kind of a deal. Or these are not the droids you're looking for. Something like that.
If you put it in that perspective, yeah.
I mean, one of the two, but yeah.
Yeah, some of the examples that we have here is like, if you were an overworked single parent, kind of not finding enough time to, get everything done. I guess you could look at kind of your power being like kind of a time warper, right? Like you can slower stop time and get what you need done.
Or you can pretend like you're the Flash.
Or yeah, you could be kind of a
Speedster.
a speedster, customer service rep, right? Or I could see a customer service rep or a counselor
Yeah.
where
True.
you could be like a truth detector, emotion absorber. That would suck, dude.
That would
Being an
really suck.
emotion absorber, like
Especially as a therapist. Oh.
yeah. Oh.
Imagine trying to brain dump that shit.
Oh. Yeah, I would not want to be an emotion absorber. That would be terrible.
I mean, the truth detector would definitely help.
Oh, the truth detector would be awesome. Yeah. But I mean, if these are things to kind of think about, because if you now compare these to real fictional characters, and I know that's kind of an oxymoron, but if you compare these to like the real fictional characters like Steve Rogers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that he's Captain America. We know that he has strength, but his heart was his power before he got the serum.
Right. And then you look at Peter Parker, right? So, him having super strength, it didn't matter much because again, his guilt-driven responsibility,
Right, because I mean, when it came to Uncle Ben,
right, great power.
Uncle Ben was only shot because he had a chance to stop that criminal,
right,
before he got it, before he shot Uncle Ben,
right,
and he decided like to not stop him,
right. And so
because he was like, well, it's not my responsibility,
right.
like,
and well, this is where Uncle Ben's famous words. He says, with great power comes great responsibility. And so, that being said, that's where Peter's like, all right, so basically, I gotta do this now because I have this great power. I want to make sure that I can be the best version of myself by doing this. And so, yes, by having that traumatic experience like that and learning from it, he's like, yeah, let me put this to good use.
And then the last one is Jean Grey, which, she gets overwhelmed by emotion and then literally becomes a cosmic level phoenix.
And she is like, I mean, when she first gets it, I mean, she doesn't even realize the power that she has. But like after a while, I mean, it's devastating. Like, I mean, we're talking like a global catastrophe, like devastating. It's not just like a, one section of the world. Like, no, I mean, it can affect everything around her.
And this is one of these quotes that you're going to want to write down again. I'm telling you right now. But the freaky part is our powers often come from pain. So it's either really poetic or it's a sign that we need therapy or both. You know what I mean? But it is true. I mean, the powers that these characters have often come from pain that they had before.
Well, I mean, I would say that's how a superhero usually is made, is some version of pain, some version of whatever made them become where they are today, and, when you look at your life, there might be some painful moments. Again, for each person, traumatic experiences are different for everybody. Like for me, it's going to be totally different than for what Matt experienced. I just remember, especially, I'm just going to say it real quick, is, growing up, actually, Matt could actually see the photos right now. There's two men or individuals that have really enlightened me into the point where, they made me question a lot of what I was doing. One was about, military life, because again, being in the military at the time and, realizing like, is that the best choice for you? Is that something you really want to do? I said, yeah. I said, I don't know what else I can do, because at the time I didn't know how the fuck, especially when we were talking about student debt, how the fuck I was going to pay for college. And that was just the way it was. And then the other guy, he was more, had nothing to do with the military piece, but it was more about, you need to smarten up. I said, you're a young man. You need to, figure out your life. You need to figure out all this shit. And I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing where you're driven, your purpose. So when I, finally was trying to figure out my life, unfortunately he passed away too. And so I'm sitting there like, after he died, it was like both of them. Like I proved them both wrong in some ways. And I said, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to show you what I can do. And I'm going to show you what what my goal is, what my purpose is and all this stuff. And so like, looking at, family members, or you're looking at, these events that just kind of shape you for who they are, like I'm not going to get really into this, but like being overseas at the time, it was a hard fucking time, man. I mean, Matt, granted, he knows that I went overseas during the time of COVID. And so like, I heard versions of different people talking about, I got to get fucking hand sanitizer and toilet paper because there's a fucking shortage of that shit, and I'm sitting there like, I'm living on a fucking base and there's literally, here's my four walls, but let's just fucking condense that even further in, so my struggles and my things were different than what, Matt was doing when he was home, and I still think about it to this day where like, nobody's going to know unless you were there to kind of like explain all this. But, I look at it as it defined me, like it was one of those moments that it has helped define me as a person, and I still look back on it and say, there's definitely some hard times and some hardships that I went through, but, I never would regret, not doing that. You know what I mean? Because like at the end of the day, like we've said, when you look at Batman, when you look at Spider-Man, if they didn't go through that shit, that raw bullshit, they never would have been the great superheroes that they are today.
Right.
So you need to go through some shit in order to grow as a person and be like, this is who I want to become. This is how I want to be, and so forth. So like I said, I understand I went a little serious on this, but like it's the truth. Like, you need to be raw.
I mean, that's what the
gritty.
episode's about. I mean, when we talk about, adapting and overcome, there's some adapt and overcome moments, like either real or fiction. Some of the characters we've already kind of mentioned. Some of these we didn't mention, but one of the ones that we did mention was Batman. He didn't have powers. He became, very powerful. Even though you could say like, well, Superman is very powerful, and all these DC characters, but Batman is like one of the most well-known DC characters, but he became as powerful as he is because of his discipline and his intellect.
Right. And
Like-
and that was the thing though. It's like, when you're looking at a guy like that where, he had to go through real pain, he had to go through real struggle, and he builds himself an empire. He builds himself secretly in that sense. And then, because I'm going to throw this back onto Iron Man. So of course this is Marvel's version of Batman in a sense, because technically, yes, his parents also died, but for a different reason and for different whatever, but very similar in that same sense. They're both if you were to take a look at both of them, maybe not like, like visually speaking.
Well, he also had a personal trauma response
Well,
too.
yes. No, what I'm saying is though, is like, if you look at both of them, I mean, they are very, very similar in how certain things are. But yes, I would say if it was me, if we're talking about science-based, I'm going to give it to Tony Stark all day when it comes to intellect-wise. Batman, yeah, we're talking if he's the war general, if he's the one that's, starting a war or doing stuff, I'm going to give it to him because I'm going to make sure that he's the one leading the charge because he understands the strategy and what's involved in the planning and stuff. I'm not saying Tony isn't. But he's,
No, but I mean,
like that's how I would look at both of them.
You take a guy like, Tony Stark, and you take a guy who's literally in a cave.
Well, true.
Who builds a suit
Right, out of
like missiles and metal.
I mean, trust me, it was impressive the way he did it. I'm not saying that.
Yeah. And you're talking a guy who also had metal shards
Right.
in his body. He makes an arc reactor that one did not exist prior to that moment.
Right.
It did not exist. He did not build that one in like their facility. Like
Right.
it was he built a little tiny one that he put in his body.
Right.
Out of materials that he had in a cave. Like
You're right. I mean,
it's
I'm
crazy.
not saying anything. I mean, it's absolutely correct.
after their Humvees exploded from missiles. So you're talking trauma response, and you're like, well, this guy got blown up. He was captured by by terrorists,
Right.
tortured, put in a cave, forced to make missiles, and this guy builds a freaking suit with shards of metal in his body that is killing him.
Right.
And he literally makes this thing that saves him and then makes a metal suit to escape. So you want to say, like, adapting and overcoming? Yeah, I'll give it to Iron Man all day.
No, that's what I mean. Like, I'm saying, like, they
Yeah.
have their strengths and weaknesses here, but, like, you're looking at how these characters have become, so great in their own rights because they need to have that defining moment that
Yeah.
builds them into those people.
And I mean, I'll hand it to Frodo, too. I mean, the amount of endurance that he went through and the amount of shit
Oh, yeah.
that he went through just to bring the ring all the way to Mordor. Like, it was like you got captured by a freaking giant spider wrapped in webbing. Like, you got like attacked by Gollum. You got
Oh, yeah.
like, not to mention like the journey itself, like that's endurance. Not to mention on top of it, the amount of empathy that he had for Gollum
Right.
and Sam. Even though Sam just wanted to get rid of everybody else.
Well, that's true. That is also very true.
You know
Sam
what I
didn't
mean?
really help in that department, but yeah.
No, I mean Sam wanted just to protect Frodo, but he was like, we need to just get rid of all the chaff and just you and me, man. Like you and me, John.
Let's
we
fucking do it, buddy.
But like that was the thing. Like Frodo, I mean, you're talking adapting and overcoming. And then same thing with 11. The trauma that 11 went through, throughout the journey of Stranger Things.
Even though it's not technically done yet, but go ahead.
No, it's not technically done, but you look at the trauma that we learn about, and then her building up to the power that she has.
Right.
At that last season that we've seen, adapting and overcoming. I mean, these are all just moments. And I mean, you can look at all these fictional characters, but you can also look at, famous figures too in real life. I mean, you can look at, I'm sure for Abraham Lincoln,
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't easy for a white dude to preach about slavery,
Emancipation Proclamation, baby.
especially when people are like, well, what the hell am I supposed to do with my slaves? Like, this is like a huge money maker for people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and then, what's really funny about, well, I guess I'll just mention history, is like, you're looking at Prohibition, right?
Prohibition, yeah.
when they're like, oh, we're going to take away your alcohol, and be like, oh, okay, well, guess what the fuck we're doing? We're going to have speakeasy, we're going to have bootleg, and we're going to have a blah, 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 so on and so forth. And there's like, all types of people.
Try
doing
this here, moonshine.
Here you go, moonshine over here. And then they literally make another amendment saying, you know what, we're not going to continue to ban alcohol throughout the United States. And we're like, holy shit. There you go. You already, you banned it and then you reinstate it. And guess what? We love our alcohol, man. We've been doing it for hundreds of years.
We're drinking it right now.
Right now, I'll tell you what, son. No, but like, it's true though. Like you got to get through the bullshit. You got to get through the adversity. You got to go through all kinds of changes and what makes you that person that comes out of this. And
Yeah, you have to look, if you're going to be geeky and you're going to follow comic books and you love these characters, you have to look beyond the superpowers, and you really have to like ask yourself, like, what is my superpower?
right.
Because each and every single person, whether you believe it or not, has a superpower.
Or has something, a unique ability about them that has the opportunity to, grow, to present itself in times of need and in times around people. And so, So like, so for example, like, Matt is very, I'll give him one power right here, right now. He's a very like self-taught individual. Like, he can literally, it seems like he can pick up a fucking book and he's like, you know what? I'm going to learn how to fucking underwater basket weave, man. That's my fucking goal. And he's like, boom, 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 boom. And he just fucking does it. And he just fucking kills it.
Sweet. Did I just learn how to underwater basket weave?
Exactly, bitch. You just,
Sweet.
so.
You can catch him on the website tomorrow.
And guess
I'm
what?
just
He'll
kidding.
be selling all that shit later on.
No, I'm just kidding. You will not find
Matt doing underwater basket weave.
You will not find weaved baskets on our website.
No.
Never.
No, but like, he shows that he's always willing to learn and he's always like trying to self-taught himself.
But I will second that. Yes, I do. And I don't know, I don't know where I've learned this skill, but yes, when it comes to sound, when it comes to my bass playing, when it comes to the website, granted, a lot of the stuff I learned has come from AI recently.
Well, recently, but I'm talking about before.
But before, yes, I could watch YouTube videos. I look stuff up, and it's just looking it up, practicing it, doing it.
But again, that's a power because like some people can do it. Yeah. So again, just doing it. Like it depends though. Some people have that innate ability to want to do it and get that done. Some people just like me, like I'm just.
Now I wish I could do that when I play guitar, but
no, right. I was more skill based in practice, but I'm just saying like sometimes I'm like I would rather somebody like teach me get the ropes a little bit, kind of get it familiar, and then if I fuck up, then I'm like okay, so I got to do this now, or I got to do this now. So I would say. I want to say one thing about myself. If Matt wants to chime in at any point, he's more than welcome to. He probably won't. He'll be like, "Yeah, fuck you, bitch." I don't mind, kind of like the self-taught thing, but like more I'm a quick learner, or at least if somebody was like, "Hey, we're gonna do this, and here you go," and give me the guidelines, give me the expectations. Great, cool, and I figure it out, and most of the time I figure it out. I might have a couple questions here and there, but generally speaking, I will figure it out, and I will try to do that as quick as I can. I would say the other thing is just I guess having that natural ability to to talk with people, like to find a common ground. I mean, shit. When
I would say it's like a I know earlier you had said like to persuade.
Oh, it's persuading, yeah, persuasion.
Like that's what you said before, almost like a force persuade, right? Like that's what you said before. But I would almost say like not quite like a persuade, but I would almost say like a power of like charm.
Oh, charming. Oh, interesting.
Like because of your outgoing and
extrovertedness.
Yes. There's that ability of, you talk to people and I don't have that. Like I just, when I will reach out to somebody and then, might be a little bit there might be a little bit of a back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
And this is even online. Like we could be chatting back and forth and then I just get bored.
Oh yeah. No, I hands down can see that.
I just get bored and I just go, yeah, I just don't care.
Right. Even though there's like 4 people that have reached out to you doing a podcast, but
even though yes, I really want to collab with this person, or I really want to like work on like, hey, let's get together and like let's collab for the podcast. I really don't care about chatting with this person anymore. Not that I really don't care, but I really just don't want to message this person anymore.
Right. I get that.
That's just how introverted I am. Like, I would rather hand it off to you so that you can do the chatting and then set up whatever. Like, that's just me. Like, I would rather just be behind the scenes and be like, you set it up.
Well, do it.
I will just do whatever you want me to do.
Right.
Just tell me when we're doing it, how we're doing it. I will work on the techie side of what we're doing, make sure it works.
Right.
Just let me know.
No, I get,
but that's where I think like your charm and like the social aspect of it, like, is what your power is, because like that's where the charm and the not the persuasion of it, but the social aspect of it. Like,
Well, and then it's funny because I told you before, like a long time ago, that I was literally just like you. I was literally someone who didn't really want to talk to people. I didn't really want to, get to know them. I didn't, so on and so forth. Because again, my childhood, it was like I was always moving. I was like, man, I don't want to keep making new friends, and then it's just a fucking process, right? It's just like, and you keep doing it, you keep doing it, keep doing it, and then you're like, what the fuck, man? Can I stay in one fucking spot and like actually get to know people? And so, as I got older, I mean, of course, then you're like, well, that's kind of also life. And like you learn that, yes, after high school, there is a thing called life that just kind of happens. And so, yes, it took me a while to get to that point, but I finally defined it. But I mean, that was the thing though, is like, for a while I was like, what can I do to to relate to people? So like, there are times where it's hard. Like, I'm not gonna lie. There was a couple times I remember a while back that I had to relate to people that I probably had no idea what it ever would feel like. I'm gonna say as an example, like transgender. I'm gonna be completely honest. Like, I have no idea. I'm not saying they're like, well, they're people. I know they're people. I'm not saying that. I'm saying more the fact that I can't relate to that. So I had to think of other ways to relate to them. I'm saying them because that's what I'm just gonna say. And it was hard. And so like I was like, wait a minute, hold on. So I was like, hey, do you like video games? Like, oh, absolutely. And I'm like, okay, cool. All right, so now I can at least I have an in now, right? So I had to think of like other things that I'm like, okay, what might they like? So talking with, so you know what I mean. So like, there's things that it's hard for individuals sometimes to, you have this power, but sometimes you're like, you're kind of like, well, shit. Well, how do I do this? Like, how do you're almost having to problem solve certain things where
see, that's
it's
where
hard.
like everybody tells me like, if you just isolated like for the rest of your life, like you would miss people. No,
Yeah,
no, I absolutely 100% wouldn't.
I know Matt doesn't like to talk to me on a daily basis anyway. So
I could move myself to a cave as long as I had food
yeah, food,
and
technology, and everything else.
and enough to like survive on. Like if you just gave me a house and said this is where you're living, you'll have food and internet and computer or whatever, but no one will ever visit you again. Sign me the fuck up. I
like,
will move
sold.
there. Sold.
Fucking
You had
done.
me. You had me at no one will ever visit you.
Yeah, so basically what I'm hearing is I will never visit Matt, is what he's saying. He's like, fuck you, you piece of shit. Get out of my life. And I'm like, fine. I see how this is. I guess the podcast is dead. Yep. Just because Matt doesn't want to fucking see me. I see how it is. No, I mean,
It's funny because I worked the other day. We have because I work at medical records, so we have a part of our medical records. We had a bunch of like private practices, so
yeah.
we have release of information as part of our medical records. But part of like the release of information people, there were private practice.
Mm.
And then with the private practice, there was NEHI, which is like the Heart Institute
Oh, okay.
for CMC. That's Catholic Medical Center for those of you that are not local for New Hampshire.
Exactly.
But long story short, the private practice people that do release of information for all of the private practices,
Right.
they moved over to the other side, which is the Access Center. So they're like the more patient side of things. They do the private practices for all the scheduling for
Right.
the doctor's offices. They moved over there. So now, starting on Monday, which is the 16th,
Mm-hmm.
they are, which is, I know when this episode comes out, that'll be like
Way down the road.
that'll be like
A couple weeks from now.
last week when the boys episode actually hit.
That too.
But on the 16th, Knee-High is going over there. So now in our huge room, so we're in a middle building.
Mm. Okay. Yep.
So our room is huge. There's only 10 of us now
Okay.
in this one room. So like I'm looking at this room and I'm like, hey, so Knee-High was all the way at the end. So I'm like, hey, now maybe I should ask my boss if I can go isolate my little cubicle area all the way in the back corner.
To really get out of the fucking way.
Like, I would love that, just to be like, I'm gonna go move my desk over in the back
So
corner.
that's what you should do, is be like, just don't even fucking say
Be
anything.
like,
Just fucking do it.
hey, Karen, can I move my desk in the back corner?
No, not even.
Why?
Yeah.
I like the corner.
So me personally, I wouldn't even fucking do it. I would just do it and then see how they react, and just be like, I just did it. It's fine. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you
Like,
saw
where,
me. I'm
where did
over
Matt
here.
go? Oh, he's in the back
He's,
corner.
in the he's punishing himself.
Why did he move back there? He said something about isolating. I don't know.
And then watch her be like, we are promoting team growth and not isolation. And you're like, fuck.
Yeah, well, I'm already back here, so
So I'm not moving,
you can either move me by hand,
or you're going to have to move people to me.
or you're gonna have to move everybody back here. In which, if you move everybody back here, I'm gonna move back up there.
And then again, so my point is, what do you want from me?
I'm just gonna keep moving myself.
I'm like, you keep fucking moving. I'm going to keep moving around.
But I think for me, that's also one of my superpowers, because for me, that's how I recharge.
True. No,
And I need that time. And that was like one of the things that I've always talked to Danielle about, is like, I don't care what you do, but there's a time
for me.
that I need that's just for me.
Right.
And you need to leave me the F alone. Not all night. I'm not talking like when I get home from work until like midnight, you need to just leave me the fuck alone. No, I'm not I'm not talking about like, Monday through Sunday from 5 to midnight, leave me the fuck alone.
And then she'll be like, I never get to see you. Well, that's kind of the point.
Well, that is the point.
That is the point. You caught me on that one.
No, but there's, like when I used to get home, like there was a time when like she would get home all the time from like, around 7 o'clock. So
Right.
like there was a good like couple hours where like the kid was at work. I'd have like a good couple hours, and like it just was like bliss. And then her hours like would change every day to be like, now she's coming home at 5:30 and I'm home at 5, and it's like she's coming home and like shit.
You're like, fuck. I had bliss and now I don't.
Yeah. So now it's just like I don't care what you're doing. I don't want you to ask me something. I don't want you to ask me for something. I don't want you to look at me. I just want at least an hour of you. If you're going to be sitting on that couch, I don't want you to like ask me for anything. I just want quiet where I can just either play PlayStation, I can watch TV, I can look at my phone, I can do something on the computer. Like, I don't care.
Right.
I don't want like to do anything else but what I want to do in that present moment. When that hour's up, go for it.
I feel like that's just a marriage thing, man, because honestly, I feel the same way. There are times where I will literally tell Allie, I'm like, listen, I love you. I love our son. I love the dog, so on and so forth. And I'm like, listen, I do. I'm in that same boat. Like, I just need time from them because, well, especially being a stay-at-home dad for so long and then now getting a job, I'm like, thank fucking God, personally. I'm just going to be a minute right now, but like, you do need that time to recharge, because you want to be the best version of yourself for everyone else as best as you can without having to be a dickhead or a prick or whatever. I mean, granted, that's most of the time, Matt, but
Yeah, I'm not trying to be rude about it, but like, it's even not really isolating because I know that she's there, so it's not really like a recharge for me. It's really more recharging when I know no one's not there, and I can just like, I feel like I can relax more when I know no one's not there.
Right. Unless you have your guardian Starker angel that comes out of nowhere and says, "Hey, how you doing, bud?"
But like, when she's looking at her phone, it's almost like she's not there anyway. But it's really just like,
well, you feel her presence. I mean, I see that.
It's just the time when like I can just
zone out.
So now right now, like she goes to bed like normally about 9:30. So it's like that's when I normally will just be like, I know that's kind of a time like no one else is around. She's in bed. The kid's in the room, like
Do whatever. Yeah.
doing whatever. So like, I have the living room to myself. Now I can do whatever the heck I want.
So I'll be like, hey, can you grab me a snack? Or hey, can you grab me a drink?
So there's really no, I can stay up. Normally I do stay up until 12-ish, 12:30. But
Yeah. No, I mean, and I get that. I mean, and that's the thing where, looking back now at the superpowers to try to wrap things up here, you know, you need some, I'm saying, and I think it just doesn't really matter when it comes down to it, but like as an individual, when you're going through stressful times and you're going through a lot of shit and you're trying to figure out yourself and you're trying to figure out purpose, you're, yada, 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 all the way down, you really need to take some time for yourself. Take those moments of bliss of not being in those struggles all the time, because the more you're stressed out, the more that you're sitting there trying to figure out, like, how am I going to get through all this shit? How am I going to, for example, like, if you're a single parent, like, how am I going to deal with this on top of my kid, on top of blah 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 blah, and so on and so forth. So it makes it harder, and it makes you realize that, you need to find that purpose. You need to find that stuff that is going to make you keep going.
I mean, it is really one of those questions. Like you're sitting there maybe listening to this episode and you're like, oh, so you're really telling me like when I was abused sexually that's my superpower? Yeah, it really is. It's one. Are you dead? No, you're not. Somehow you've managed to survive. You've managed to. I mean, do you have a family? Yeah. Well, there you go. You've managed to not only survive, but you've managed to duplicate yourself by having a family.
Right.
You may not be okay.
No, man.
And I'm not saying like you have to be okay. No one is saying you have to be okay. No one is saying that Steve Rogers was okay.
Yeah, after his
when
shit.
he became Captain America. No one is saying that Peter Parker was okay. We're not saying you have to be okay.
No, well,
What we're saying is you take your trauma and you look at how it's affected you. Your ability to survive. And this is exactly what that quote earlier was saying, right? Let me go find it. You don't get a healing factor unless you've been hurt. So your survivability is your superpower.
right. And in looking back at like your example that you just said, I mean, the reality is this is like, the only way you're going to move forward is to realize what is important to you. Like, I remember times of when Matt and I, were working at, Farnham, good old Farnham, I always like to bring up. I remember sometimes that guys would be like, man, I don't know if I want to get sober again, this and that. I have all this shit going on. And, I have a family, I have some kids. And I'm like, oh, wait, stop you right there. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, your kids, your family, these individual things that are making you who you are. You're telling me you can't do it for your family? You can't do it for your kids? You can't do it, blah, 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 go on and so forth. And I'm like,
Yeah, it's like sometimes you got to look past your shit and you got to look at what the mess is. So like, yeah, you're looking at, okay, so you were abused. You're alive today.
right,
That means you survived.
right. Now, how do you move forward? Now, how do you deal with
You
this?
have to look at that survival and how you survived. That's your superpower. That's what you focus on. That's your purpose.
Right.
Not your trauma. Your trauma is not your purpose.
You know what? That
And
should
that-
hold on. That right there should be a quote right there.
That's
Matt
that's
Gunther. Your trauma is not your purpose.
that's the problem with like what people are focusing on is like your trauma is not your purpose. The fact that you survived the trauma,
Is your
the
purpose?
fact that you survived your addiction this far in your life
Is your purpose?
is your purpose.
So I'm going to say right now, 2025, Matt Gunther. It says, trauma is not your purpose. And you know what's funny? Matt's gonna get a tattoo. This is the exact same thing. No, I'm joking. But yes, no.
You can fill in the blank. Like your trauma is not your purpose. Your addiction is not your purpose, right?
Yeah, I mean it's true.
Your blank is not your purpose,
right. And
like your failure is not your purpose.
right. I mean, if she's like blank, not your purpose. No,
Right.
you're right. Like fill in the blank. Here you go.
It doesn't matter what the blank that you put in there is, but that's not whatever that blank, that empty spot is.
Right.
Whatever your mess
Yes.
is, that doesn't have to be your purpose.
Right.
It's how you survived it, or how you've worked through it, or how you've adapted to the point that you've adapted to today. That is your superpower.
Right.
And that's the whole point of this episode, is to get you to understand that.
That blank is not your purpose. That's the whole point of today's episode. Is blank is not your purpose.
That blank, whatever that mess is, whatever you're dealing with, is not your purpose. How you've survived or how you've dealt with it, that is your superpower.
Wow. Look at you, Matt. You were like Aristotle over here.
I know.
You're
I'm
just like the Plato, Aristotle. I mean, you're like a philosopher right
you
now, man.
put my name right up against them.
Oh,
like,
I sure fucking
I'm like
did.
right up there.
You're like right up there today. He's philosophical.
Every rose has its thorn.
Or country road, take me home. I'm joking. He's like, no, we're not doing that. He's like, no, we're not doing the Kingsmen. No, I'm sorry. No, guys. I mean, we appreciate you. You know, the one thing I will say real quick is like, you know, doing these episodes with Matt, you know, especially like these ones, they're meaningful, right? You know, we even said in the beginning when we started doing this podcast that, you know, we're here to give back to the community. You know, we're not always the leading expert in some things, but you know, we're pretty. I'd say both of us are pretty philosophical individuals, and we like to try to you know put little tidbits of wisdom for you guys. But at the same time, it's you know we're making you realize you know you got to think about certain shit, you know, because I feel like in society we don't do that. You know?
And it's not about ranting and raving. Like we're not trying to like you know bring negativity or you know anything like that. Like these episodes are trying to bring positivity and real thinking behind,
right, and not just some bullshit that we come together
and overcoming your obstacles. Not just like you know the problems with mental health or you know just ranting about whatever issues. You know,
whatever the issue is
society is having. I mean, although we do rant about those things, but
yeah.
I mean, these Evolve episodes are really just about bringing awareness and helping people, and that's what our passion is. So
right, I mean, and that's just you know what I'll say this real quick or as a rephrase. It is one of our passions, but I mean, it's not our purpose, Matt. No, I'm joking. It's one of those things that we like to do because
it is part of our purpose, though.
Well, no, I mean, no, hold on, no, hold on. The motto is, what's the motto, Matt?
Well, it's evolve, adapt, and overcome.
No, I meant the original motto of our actual podcast and as a whole.
Well, I mean, it's See Night Owl Geeks.
Oh, right, and so right, that was the motto, and so like, yeah, I mean, in a way of giving back, you know, we're passionate about like certain topics like we've been talking about, with like. You know, our goal that is our passion. That is our purpose is to unite all geeks, whether it be, you know, through Evolve episodes, whether it be, you know, talking about the geek culture or the movies or the TV shows or fucking you're talking about cooking or fishing or shooting or whatever. You know, it's about getting people together and talking about shit that they're passionate about, and you get more people involved, and then you're like, hey, you know, we built a community, and now the community can help one another. You know, so on and so forth. And so that's where, you know, Matt and I, we understand that community is key, you know, and I know that Matt's like, well, I'm a one-man island. I can go live off and fuck all you, rest of you, whatever. And I'm like, I get you. But at the same time, you know, I know Matt, you know, he's built differently and that's fine, you know, and sometimes that's just what it is. And, you know, me, I know this motherfucker. I love him to death, but sometimes, yeah, he don't pick up his fucking phone sometimes, and I don't either. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I make a point out of it because I'm like, you know, I want him to answer. But it's one of those things, you know. We've already built our relationship. We've already built that stuff because that's just who we are, you know. Because that's how we roll. Now, I don't think he'll ever have another relationship like me down the road with somebody else. I can tell you that unless you want to fucking copy paste something else, I highly doubt that Matt will ever do that again. That's for fucking sure. But anyways, I know we've been ranting here. But again, we thank you. We appreciate you guys tuning in. So hopefully next time we're going to be talking more about, actually I was thinking about it. It was the, oh, wait a minute. See, now I'm drawing a blank now because I was.
What, for next week?
Yeah, was it next week after that?
Superhero video games.
Yeah,
so we'll be
superhero
talking
games,
all
yes.
about video games that are about superheroes or superpowers. So that'll be a fun one.
Yes, no, that's right. Yeah, I'm sorry. We talked about it earlier too, and I was like, shit, I forgot.
But before we go, just real quick.
Jesus, all right.
Just, yeah, this will be the last thing. And then I'm going to hit this button right here, and it's going to play the outro music, and we're gone.
Okay, cool.
But I do want to just say this real quick about the website. Check out the website because it's all new. We just updated it, and you can actually play the entire podcast on our podcast page right on the website. So if you don't have an Android or an Apple phone, which is kind of weird in today's society, but
That's true.
it is possible. I mean, you could have a Google phone, which is, I don't know if anybody has a Google phone, but anyways, there is a podcast player on our webpage that you can play the entire podcast. You don't need a Spotify account. You don't need any kind of an account. You can just go right on the web and play it right from our website.
Yeah, and until next time.
Stay geeky, 'cause we're geeks from the multiverse.